Discussing today's topics from an African American perspective. This is Another View.
Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Okay, I'm just going to be completely honest with you. I believe in historically black colleges and universities. I'm a graduate of an HBCU, Bennett College. My producer is a graduate of an HBCU, Norfolk State University. So is my audio engineer. He not only received his bachelor's degree, but he's soon to obtain his master's degree from NSU. I know that without HBCUs, thousands of African American men and women would not have the educational and career opportunities that are enjoyed by the majority. I also know that HBCUs are struggling, that many of its alum do not support the schools financially as they should, that many HBCUs are being left behind academically, and unfortunately, sometimes leadership is not what it should be. Today, we were supposed to talk to leaders of Norfolk State University about NSU. Provost Dr. Sandra DeLoach, Vice Provost Dr. Mildred Fuller, and Vice President for Finance and Administration Gerald Hunter were our scheduled guests. And the conversation was supposed to be about efforts to correct issues that caused the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, or SACS, to place the school on probation, the most serious sanction before the loss of accreditation, and also about the very positive things that have been happening on campus, such as the new cybersecurity master's degree program. However, this morning, under the direction of Interim President Eddie Moore, our guests were told they could not participate on our program. We find this very puzzling, since it was Norfolk State who reached out to us here at Another View and asked if they could come and talk to the Hampton Roads community and beyond about the progress that is being made at the school. Nevertheless, we are going to hold a conversation about historically black colleges and universities, and at any time, if Interim President Moore or any of the other leaders at Norfolk State would like to call us and talk to us, we welcome them. We apologize to our listeners that we are not able to bring you the show we promised you, but we'd like to introduce you now to our guest who graciously agreed to be with us on very short notice. Please welcome Jared Carter, founding editor of HBCUdigest.com, an online daily news blog dedicated to coverage of HBCUs throughout the United States. He's also the host of HBCU Digest Radio, a weekly talk radio program covering societal, cultural, and institutional issues at HBCUs. And he's founder and executive director of the Center for HBCU Media Advocacy, a national nonprofit organization working to enhance HBCU's new media and media outreach opportunities. Hi, Jared. How are you?
Hi, Barbara. Thank you for having me today.
And thank you so much for joining us. So I think that maybe NSU could use some of your expertise in terms of media outreach, huh?
Well, I would say they have some great people over there in communications, and I would, I'm prayerful that, there's a good reason that they weren't able to come on and, provide your listeners with a great case for the positive things that they're doing, not just relative to the SACS action, but just in the development of the institution. Really, there are some great things happening at Norfolk State, and so I'm optimistic that, just the day-to-day operation and preparing for the fall 2015 semester and some other things, just prevented a more substantive dialogue. But, anytime I can, stand in and bat for Norfolk State, a great institution like that, I'm happy to do so.
Well, that is very true because there are a lot of good things going on, and we don't know the reason why President Moore decided to pull the plug, but at some point maybe we shall. But let's move the conversation on to a broader subject of HBCUs because our universities and colleges, there are some private, some state funded. There are about 99 to 101. I keep hearing two different numbers at this point because we know we've had some closures recently, but some are healthy, some are really struggling, particularly financially. What's going on? Give us an overview of kind of the state of the HBCU today.
There are a number of complex issues that range from the care and support from federal and state government and HBCUs and as you mentioned in your introduction, the involvement and engagement of alumni of these schools. But the short of it is, you like most colleges and universities throughout the country, you have some really good ones. You have some really struggling institutions. And then in the middle, you'll find the most of the HBCUs, which are navigating to find ways to evolve programming, to be more engaging with graduates and corporate communities and governmental agencies to support their academic and community missions. So, the narrative that all HBCUs are struggling just isn't true. There are a number of large public and large private institutions that are doing very well and are nationally competitive in the graduates they produce, the professions in which they assist in providing a quality workforce, and in the outreach that they deliver to the community. I think the goal for all of us who love HBCUs and who are products of them are to try to get each of these institutions, whether they're public, private, big or small, up to speed with what their mission is and the difference that they can make in the communities where they stand.
So, Jared, give us some examples of some of the more well-known HBCUs that are making it and are making a difference in terms of, from a national perspective, well-known, because I hear so many times people saying, HBCU, it's not a good school, they don't turn out good students, they're not as good as a Harvard or Yale, they could throw out these other colleges' names. So give us some examples of schools who are doing just as well.
Well, I like to look at some of those ones that are in the news for less than positive, information specific about accreditation. Obviously Norfolk was supposed to be at the center of this conversation, but as I'm sure most of your listeners know, that school earlier this year received a substantive grant to be a major partner in cybersecurity workforce development. And you can't get that unless your infrastructure is in a good enough place where your faculty are doing the research, your students are capable of taking the theory and taking the work and transferring that over to a successful career in that field. And as we know, cybersecurity is a major emerging field for the country because government, corporations are going to need that kind of expertise to protect data, to protect citizens' information. And so obviously Norfolk is in a good position to produce a workforce and be or offer competitive programs that a lot of people throughout Hampton Roads and throughout the country are going to take interest in. You look at Tuskegee. This is another school that was recently subject to a SACS accreditation action, but they've received a number of grants relative to agricultural development and veterinary science development. Again, these are two important fields. Agriculture is huge. It's the biggest industry in the world. You can't do anything without food. You can't do anything without crops that help make clothes. So for Tuskegee to be at the forefront of an industry that not only does the United States need, but the world needs, and to receive funding from the federal government, which signals them as an adept and capable partner in increasing diversity in this industry, is a good sign. So, you look at schools like, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought, and then I want to ask the question.
You look at, schools like South Carolina State University. There's a lot to be made about where that school is headed. There's been a lot of action from the governor and the legislative, in a sense, takeover of their board of trustees. But at the same time, alumni there are doing a wonderful job of trying to raise money, trying to recruit students and make an enrollment threshold that will put the good school on footing. So these are three schools that have been in the news for less than positive stories, but each and every one of them are doing things that are positioning them, one, to be of service to their state, and two, to be on the map for being a federal or national partner in advancing industry and commerce.
So then how do we explain that dichotomy then? Because let's take Norfolk State as an example. They just got that $30 million grant to do cybersecurity. They're supposed to be starting an online master's degree program in cybersecurity that's supposed to start this fall, is my understanding. But yet, SACS, the accrediting agency, in 2013 had them on warning. They thought they were going to come off warning and wound up on probation. And now they've got to turn in a report at the end of September. And if they don't, go up to snuff, they could wind up either being back on probation again or worse. So how does that jive? How do you get $30 million from the federal government on one hand, and on the other hand, you've got your accrediting agency saying, hey, you guys got some major problems here?
Well, I think the major thing to look at is exactly what accreditation is. And the short of that is it's a set of standards that a group of schools all agree that they will adhere to in order to be viewed by federal funding agencies and credit rating bureaus and all the like, that this is an institution of good repute. So accreditation isn't something that's legal, or it isn't something that the federal government says you have to operate as a school. It's just an agreement between a group of schools that says this is what we're going to be, this is what we're going to follow. These are our rules. And so you can have a healthy and thriving academic program at your school and be in accreditation trouble for financial. Or you can have a good financial structure at your school and be in accreditation trouble because your athletics is a mess.
But I thought that if your accreditation is gone, you can't get federal funding for scholarship or for tuition.
For student loans, correct.
For student loans.
And the truth of it is, it takes a lot. I mean, a lot to lose accreditation. Essentially, accreditation is structured so you know exactly what the standards are. When SACS comes to your campus to say, here's what we've heard about some of the struggles you're having, let's take a closer look, they give you a detailed report about what it is you need to fix. They monitor and offer assistance in your ability to fix it. And essentially, to lose your accreditation, you have to almost ignore all of their recommendations.
So they pretty much
look at schools,
they try to walk your hand.
Like St. Paul's, right? I mean, you almost have to not do what they ask you to do to lose it, because they don't want to take accreditation. Nobody wants to make students suffer. Nobody wants faculty and staff to lose jobs. Nobody wants a college to close, because essentially when you close a college, you're not just depriving those students of opportunities. You're not just taking those jobs. You're taking away economic impact from an entire community. So SACS is not in the business of saying, we want to keep you out. If anything, they want to keep you in, and will do all that they can as a review body to keep you in business. So you almost just have to say, we don't care, and we won't we won't follow the rules, and we won't follow the instructions to lose it. And I think that Norfolk State won't be in a position to lose it, because with what appears to be some stable leadership at this point, with some very good confidence in financial reporting and auditing, they're going to be on the right foot in short order.
Okay. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. We're talking about the state of historically black colleges and universities and what their futures are, and would love to hear your opinion. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Jared, we've got a question on Facebook. They want to know, what does governance have to do with SACS accreditation? I know governance was one of the issues that Norfolk State was facing.
Exactly. So one of the rules that is getting a lot of HBCUs in trouble is SACS has a standard that says the board oversees the policy of an institution. They are not to be involved in the day-to-day operation of the school. That's not their job. Their job is to fundraise. Their job is to be the last word on policy. And if you think about what a board is, it really is just a representation of the public trust, or the public at large, that says we have a stake in this school's success. And so they're not supposed to be making decisions about who your football coach is. They're not supposed to be making decisions about what kind of programs you offer. They should take recommendations and make suggestions if they're asked, but they're not to be making those decisions. Norfolk State, in previous administrations, was believed to be, if you read the SACS report, a little too involved in having its will over day-to-day operations, having its will imposed over how we are reporting financial stability, when are we reporting financial stability, what is the turnover like in all the presidents that we've had. And so SACS looks at that and says, well, if your board is not right, we need to look at this, because obviously you need to change the way you're doing business, or else you won't be in business.
Exactly. And that also goes for finances, too, which is another area where HBCUs seem to struggle, not only in terms of getting money in, but also the managing of the funds that they get.
And that's true, and it's a double-edged sword. A lot of HBCUs are contending with losing a lot of students at one time. Some of this is tied to changes in the federal loan programs with Pell Grant loans and PLUS loans. Some of those rules that were changed in 2011, some 3 and 4 years later, still have impact on HBCU campuses. And what you had for many of them, public and private alike, was the expectation that we're going to be able to bring in 1,100 students every year. And that's going to be able to keep the doors open, keep faculty paid. We're going to be in okay business. We're not thriving, but we're still here. But when you change those rules, and most of your student body is comprised of people who need the Pell Grant or need the PLUS loan, and now the expectation of 1,100 drops down to maybe 400 or 500, if you multiply your in-state or out-of-state tuition times 400 kids, you imagine how much money you've lost. Yeah. And so now, in the matter of a summertime or in the matter of 1 year, you have to scramble to adjust your budget based on a drop in enrollment that you didn't necessarily expect. Now, schools are changing their expectations, but at the same time, and this actually goes back to the accreditation part, if you change so dramatically your academic and your student service profile to meet what you can afford, you may very well jeopardize your accreditation because you're not offering the same service provisions to students. You don't have the same liberal arts focus that you used to have. Now that you're cutting programs and you're cutting personnel, you may be operating outside of your mission. And so this is a very tricky game because all of this ties back to accreditation, all of this ties back to finance, all of this ties back to public perception. But by the time it hits the media, in a lot of respects, you see the narrative, enrollment fail, or Norfolk State or whomever is down hundreds of students. And the perception is, oh, they didn't do a good job recruiting. That's not necessarily true. When you see accreditation in trouble, you think, oh, mismanagement. That's not necessarily true. They may have been trying to make adjustments on the fly that may prompt SACS to say, let's take a look at this and let you know that we're aware of these changes you're going through, but let's work together to make it a more solvent program for everybody involved.
So let me ask you one other question then. In terms of students, since you are, you're blogging and so forth, I'm sure you're hearing from young people who have the choice of going to an HBCU or going to a majority college. Are they as passionate as when I went to college? You were passionate about going to an HBCU. There was a reason that you wanted to go. Is that passion still there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's still a healthy percentage of students who are the children or grandchildren or nieces and nephews of very, very loyal and ardent HBCU alumni. And so because that spirit courses through their veins, obviously they're going to be more inclined to go to an HBCU. However, what we are finding is that demographic is shrinking, and not because families and not because students don't want to attend an HBCU. For many of them, particularly the high-achieving students, it's a better business decision to attend another school. So if you are somebody who grew up in Washington, D.C., and you're in the top 10, 15% of your class, and Howard University offers you $8,000 a semester for a $20,000 tuition, and Syracuse calls you and says, we'll offer you $10,000 for a $19,000 tuition, or whatever the case may be. A lot of these students are looking at, well, what's the cheaper or cheapest opportunity for me to attend school?
Right. Which one can I
afford? That's what they're making the decision off of. Yeah. The other part of it is, are HBCUs across the country in a position to offer competitive programs? We're in a position right now in 2015 where a lot of the common programs that would have led to graduates getting a job out of school don't necessarily have the professional focus that is necessary for a lot of companies and a lot of industries that they're seeking in today. So, for example, when I graduated from Morgan State University in 2003, I was an English major. I had a concentration in journalism, but I was an English major. There were some opportunities for me to be a reporter. I could have sought certification as a teacher. There are a number of things I could have done. Today, Morgan State offers a Bachelor's of Science in journalism. Why? Because specifically, news companies, digital media industry, are looking for reporters with training that are ready to go or somewhat ready to go when they get out of school. So you can't be an English major with a lot of training in classic literature and liberal arts and humanities, but you can't write journalistically.
Right.
So schools are trying to come out and develop programs that tailor graduates to be work ready. And the struggle is, can enough schools do that?
And with the focus on all of the STEM areas now too, that becomes even more of an issue. Hold on, Alvin joins us from Franklin. Hi, Alvin, you're on the air.
How you doing? It's a very stimulating program.
Thank you.
And I'm enjoying it. One thing that I think that we overlook is that HBCUs serve the African American community very faithfully up until the age of desegregation. The game changed. Everybody wants students now, whether they're black or white, because students fund institutions. The great challenge for our HBCUs is to not be the best in town, but be the most unique. And if they would just do shared value, bring the community in, focus on community needs, we produce African American physicians, attorneys, business people more so than any other institution. We've got to continue that focus and meet the needs of our African American community and not have our presidents and faculty people get comfortable and sit there and focus on their own survival. If that continues, you'll see a lot more closings. Thank you.
Thank you, Alvin, for your comment. What do you think, Jared?
No, I absolutely agree with him, and I a shout out to that brother. He's in Franklin. My mother's from Southampton, so I appreciate somebody from that area calling in. I would say that it's the obligation of the HBCU to be even more aggressive about not only creating a work-ready graduate, but an entrepreneurial-ready graduate. For those schools that are landlocked and in geographic locations where they're not necessarily hotbeds for college towns or students want to live and work there, it's even more pressing for a school like Alcorn State, like Grambling, like Mississippi Valley, like Wiley, to have their students come out and be ready to create businesses in those communities. So they have to be able to create restaurants, create research parks, create, shops and commercial opportunities, buy franchises. Because what's going to happen is those schools, if they continue to be on the trajectory where they just happen to be in an area where nobody wants to be, they're going to close. Yeah. And people who live around that school and work at that school are going to be out of an opportunity. And those communities that could have been sprawling opportunities for development and able to attract corporations to come in and do business with them, they're just not going to be on the radar anymore. So I think HBCUs have to do a much better job of conditioning their graduates to not only be a worker, but to be an owner in industry. That's one of the things that's going to position HBCUs to thrive, because if you can create an owner that's a graduate, that graduate becomes wealthy and recycles his or her dollars back into the institution that trained them to be ready.
Absolutely. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the state of historically black colleges and universities with Jared Carter, founding editor of HBCUdigest.com, an online daily news blog dedicated to covering HBCUs nationwide. Let's talk to Mark in Norfolk. Hi, Mark. You're on the air.
Hey, good afternoon, Mr. Carter. I just want to agree with a lot of what Mr. Carter is saying, in particular to Norfolk State, where I'm an alumnus. The financial situation is, I'm not going to say it's over, but they're just pretty much about over the top now, and they've been very careful in their community relations reporting of it, but it's in very, very steady leadership, very, very competent hands at this point, and I think they've pretty much weathered the storm in those regards. And to the caller from Franklin, I just wanted to kind of chime in. He's exactly right. The posture of what I remember about Norfolk State, and it was pretty much universal wide amongst the HBCUs, is that everyone was linked together in the sense that the professors knew that because they were professors at at a HBCU, they weren't getting much love on a national scale. So therefore, the success of the student was directly tied to the success of the professor. And so you actually had professors who went over and beyond to make sure that you were equipped so that you could succeed. And then just lastly, I think the HBCU environment, and I think Mr. Carter and what he does may have a great role to play in this, is we need to know like the who's who that graduated from the black colleges and universities. And I think, like I didn't know that Walter Payton, graduated from an HBCU. I didn't know that the greatest wide receiver ever, Jerry Rice, went to an HBCU. I didn't know that Scottie Pippen went to an HBCU without really being in depth and being in circles where we had those conversations. So I think if we can highlight our great ones, and there are many. I mean, there are probably too many to list. But if each university could concentrate on their greatest and across the board and boast the fact that these individuals, by way of an HBCU, were able to accomplish, heights beyond anyone's imagination, I think that could be a very, very good recruitment tool.
Okay, Mark, thanks so much for the call. And they're not all athletes, as a matter of fact, that graduated from HBCUs, but we get your point. Definitely. Jared, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I mean, he's exactly right.
He's right.
I think it's hard for students and young graduates to come out and be something that they can't see. And I think the athletic reference is important because I think part of the spirit of HBCUs, which has been diminished in a lot of graduates, went away with athletics. It's hard for us to be passionate about schools that don't have that built-in weekly kind of rush or adrenaline pump of school spirit, like in Alabama or like UVA or like the University of Maryland where I'm at. Big state school, thousands of people go on campus and watch it. They're on television. It's the ultimate marketing opportunity. We haven't had that, we mean an HBCU, since a different world. And that was 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. So you don't have any kind of pop culture representation
let me ask you,
HBCUs.
Jared, let me ask you about that, though, because, is it ESPNU? And I've seen some of the HBCU games, and you look in the stands, and nobody's there. You even look at the coverage and the way that the coverage is done. You hear the roar of a UVA game, and you can hear, the people chanting, and you can feel the game. You look at the coverage of the HBCU game, and it's almost like watching a high school game. And I don't mean to disparage a high school game, but the quality is just very, very different. Why is that so different? What's going on there?
Part of it, like I said, it's the marketing. If you're living in Norfolk or Hampton and you see ODU billboards all the time and the coach is on, wavy, cheesy chin all the time, and the highlights are on local TV and radio all the time, what you want to see is what you're always exposed to. And because HBCUs don't have that marketing budget where, one, we can kind of expose the sports product all the time, two, because we don't have a lot of recruits coming out of high school that are nationally known, and three, because we don't have the resources that could lend themselves to a wide range of people getting to know the coaches and the athletes. You have this perfect storm of anonymity for our sport. And the only time you really see that is when a team is able to transcend nationally, i.e. Norfolk State making the NCAA tournament and actually winning a game. Mm-hmm. That's when you start to get renowned. Or Hampton University playing Kentucky. So you almost have to be the best of the best among your peer group just to even get attention. Where a school like UVA is going to get attention all over Virginia because they're UVA. And so one of the things we have to do is to be more aggressive as professional alumni to say, go to our companies or go to the companies that we own and say, hey, how can we do a little bit more to support athletics? Because truly, people think it's just sports and it's just a game. Sports is the biggest marketing vehicle for any institution. If you ask the University of Alabama or you ask UCLA, where would you be without sports? They wouldn't have an answer. Sports is a huge component of recruitment, a huge component of alumni giving, a huge component of political and legislative outreach. Because there's no other opportunity that you have where you can almost on a weekly basis for months at a time invite a whole broad cross-section of people to your campus and to sit somewhere for 3 hours.
And see
and
what
while
you have
they're
going
sitting
on.
there, to be captivated by other messages. You can have at any given point the governor of the state in a skybox suite at your university, telling him about, hey, I hope you're enjoying the game. By the way, we also could use your support in this cybersecurity initiative that we have going.
Yeah. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. What questions do you have about historically black colleges and universities? Levon joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Levon. You're on the air.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So I'm 20 years old. I've been in the Navy for 10 years, and I'm just getting out. And I had the choice to stay in Norfolk or go back home to Maryland, but I opted to stay here in Norfolk and go to college.
Mm-hmm.
So I could go to Norfolk State like some of my friends have. I could go to ODU, and I also had the opportunity to go to William & Mary because I wanted to do my bachelor's in business. So I decided to go to William & Mary, and I'm getting a little gruff from some of my friends, but, you know, we scream diversity, diversity, diversity. Why do I want to go to a school where there really isn't a lot of diversity versus William & Mary? There's way more opportunity. I'm going to encounter people from all over the world.
Okay. Jared, you want to respond?
Well, the interesting thing is I would ask that caller, has he even been to the Norfolk campus to see the level of diversity? See, commonly there's this misconception that there's no diversity at an HBCU, that all you're going to see is black folks. Well, if that's your limited scope of diversity, then I almost feel sorry for you, because if all you anticipate that you're going to see is black Americans, then that means that you don't care to see black Caribbean, you don't care to see black folks from African nations, you don't care to see people from the Middle East, you don't care to see people from Australia, you don't care to see people from India. Not only that, to go to William & Mary, which I bet would be exponentially more expensive than Norfolk State, to a degree that probably has, because of a result of its engagement with the federal government, more connections into the workforce and more opportunities for support of veterans, because that's an emerging focus of import for HBCU. It sounds like to me there's just been a lack of homework on the part of that caller, and not only that, there's just a belief in the stereotype rather than to say, how can I break those stereotypes?
Well,
how
but
can I look beyond that and see what's really the deal?
And that's one of the issues also. I think that HBCUs have a hard time overcoming, and that is perception. And I wanted to ask you about that, Jared, because as I hear people talk about HBCUs a lot, and the perception is that they're just not as good. And how do HBCUs, because they don't have the marketing money, as you were talking about, and they don't have a lot of times the opportunities that a lot of other schools have, what can they do to try to turn that perception around?
It's really up to strategic placements, like speaking on this show, which has a diverse audience with a diverse range of perspectives, taking advantage of the opportunities to use your programs to get in front of people who work in industries and in companies who may have one belief system about HBCUs, but would be surprised to find out something totally different about a school or a set of schools. The most powerful thing that an HBCU can use is when it clicks in somebody's head, I didn't know that about that school. Because once that thought change takes place, once that tipping point occurs, now you have their attention to say, well, what else didn't I know? Commonly, people, I read comments on Facebook posts and news articles, and people say, we'll close them down because they're not diverse and this, that, and the other, and they're not, they're only for black folks. Why would you go to a black school when everybody can go to this school? HBCUs have never discriminated. They've never kept anybody out on the basis of race or ethnicity. Other schools have done that, but what's the narrative? And why is it that more people who are non-black historically have not chosen to go to HBCUs, even though these schools have never boxed anybody out because of race? So what we're basically telling people is a school that has never boxed anybody out of race, that has been the victim of a narrative driven through media, driven through culture, driven through history, to drive people to other institutions now that desegregation is available. And even then, we're seeing around the country a number of students who are not really feeling, quote-unquote, desegregation because they're being limited in opportunities, being ostracized because of their race. Why are we still believing that? HBCUs, let me tell you something. HBCUs are not in a position to turn anybody down. HBCUs want white students.
They want all students.
Desperately. They want every kind of student. They would never turn you away. And the big secret is a lot of white folks are going to HBCUs. Why? Because they're more affordable, because the degrees are competitive, and then in industries that you can't find just anywhere else.
Absolutely. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Gwen joins us from Virginia Beach. Hi, Gwen. You're on the air.
Yes. How are you?
Okay. How are you?
Okay.
Good.
I'm just calling because I'm so happy that you are running this program today.
Thank you.
Because I think the gentlemen have said so much that I wanted to say, but I'll just reiterate maybe and start off by saying that the comments that have been made in terms of talking about the media and some of the problems that we have, I think in terms of the Norfolk State situation, one of the things that has really kind of irritated me to the nth degree this year is the fact that I run into people who have some very negative things and ideas about what Norfolk State's problems were and so on and so forth. And one of the things that some people, myself included, felt that if we could do more in terms of letting the community know what we're doing. But the problem is I have been involved in some institutional things. I'll let you know I retired from Norfolk State, and I was a professor there. And one of the things that bothered me, even as I was a student at Norfolk State, was the fact that some of the local media, not all of it, would, I would be involved in things where our students had excelled quite lovely. I mean, they won money coming back. For example, the Honda Campus All-Star Challenge team, academic challenge team, now sponsored by American Honda, competition like College Bowl, won $15,000 and came in third place in terms of 48 institutions that were all HBCUs, and we did not get one piece said about the positiveness or whatever in terms of the kids' achievements. And I could go on and on and on, but right. I just want to say that there's a lot that needs to be done, and certainly one of them is that we really need more money for publicizing what the HBCUs are doing, what their programs are like, and so forth, because a lot of the people that I talk to in the community are simply, of both races, are simply ignorant of what is actually going on. And a lot of people don't read the newspapers these days and so on and so forth. And I hate to say it, but some of them are out here in the community, giving negative vibes out there about what is going on. I happened to be on the Tide one weekend coming into downtown Norfolk. And this this white man was on the Tide. And when the people he was with a group of relatives. When they got to Norfolk State, I was horrified. And I mean, I couldn't hardly open my mouth to say anything to the man. He was telling the people, oh, that's a second-class school, and you don't want to be there, and that's just like going to a high school. So I guess to end it, okay. There are a lot of things that have been said, and I just want to say again, and I'll get off, that I am so happy that you did this program because this was needed.
Thank you so much, Gwen, for the call. We appreciate that. And I hear her frustration, and a lot of people have that same frustration. Our phone lines are lit up, so I'm going to keep going. Will Levis, who is on our roundtable every second Friday of the month. Hi, Will. You're on line too. Barbara? I'm doing great. What's on your mind?
Yeah, my quick thought was, I'd recently, because as you know, and I've said on the show, I'm an alum of Lincoln University up in Pennsylvania, the nation's first black college. And I recently spoke to my alumni association about the state of black colleges, state of colleges in general. And I don't know, I apologize if this was addressed by the guests, but I think one of the things when you talk about negative perception is that the alumni ourselves can do is to stop talking negatively about our own schools or about our HBCU experience in general, because we have a tendency to get nostalgic and talk about long lines and how tough it was and this, and that, and the other. We ourselves perpetuate that negative tone that is out there. And so we first need to be the ones who talk positively about our schools and recognize that when you talk negatively about your own institution or about other institutions similar to it, you actually tarnish your own degree. And I value my degree very highly. And I've gone on to University of Arizona School of Journalism. I'm working on a doctorate at ODU. But my love is always for Lincoln University. And so I think that's the number one thing that we can do. And also, your guest was mentioning about sports. And the thing is, sports, yes, is a very powerful marketing tool, but there are a lot of well-known schools out there that do not have great sports teams, but they're respected because of their academics and their business and the other things that they do. And I think that HBCUs have to.
Hello? Oh, I think we lost Will. But the point, Jared,
dropped that one.
Oh, I guess. But Jared, he brings up a very good point. Not only speaking about the education, about speaking positively about the school, but also supporting the schools financially.
So here's the deal about that. If when we hear about people alumni who don't give back to HBCUs and this and another, even if we had 50% alumni participation, that would not, or alumni giving, that would not be enough to be transformative to fix some of the issues with these schools. You got to remember, HBCUs were created to make, in the late 1800s, essentially to create teachers, preachers, and farmers.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they were for. And that was a sign of the times. Now, luckily, through God's grace, these schools have evolved to be much more than that, but that legacy still follows. And some of the disparities that impact African Americans in this nation follow that in terms of earning potential, in terms of household income. So we have to kind of reshape the narrative around giving for HBCUs. We commonly think of major gift to an HBCU as $1 million or more. I tend to think that for HBCUs, that might be $10,000 or more. In some schools, that may be $5,000. That may make you a major donor because based on what your income is and based on what African Americans can gross as a collective group in this country, that may be the way we need to look at giving. The same thing about participation in alumni. If you have a school that graduates on average about 900 to 1,100 students per year, and UVA is graduating 3,000 students per year, the pool of graduates who can give is larger at a UVA than it would be at a Norfolk State or a Virginia State. And so we have to kind of get our heads around and our arms around the actual statistics before we say what we don't do and what we can't do, and look at that data and say, now look at what we do given this reality.
Gotcha.
Given that we're only but so big, given that we only earn but so much, are we actively participating? And I think in a lot of cases for a lot of schools, the answer would be yes.
Okay. We got about 4 minutes left, and I want to talk to you, get your opinion about the future of HBCUs. Where do you think we're going forward? I mean, do you think more schools are going to close? Do you think they're going to start to specialize? Where do you see things going?
Sadly, some schools are going to close. Some schools are going to change athletic affiliation, dropping down from Division I to Division II. You're going to see a lot of schools start to shrink. They're not going to be able to sustain a full liberal arts complement of programs. They just won't be able to afford it. But that may be good news in some respects, because I'm hoping that somewhere along the line, when we look at geography and we look at funding, that some schools may actually get together and say, hey, you know what, we're stronger together than we are apart. And that way, before we can close, there may be opportunities to merge some private institutions with some public that are nearby. There may be some opportunities to, as you mentioned, to create specialties around some of their stronger programs to make them more attractive to companies and government to be able to get more funding and to put more people to work. And I think that if we can do a more effective job in showing that these programs are competitive and showing that we can unite around some common issues to improve the conditions of state and country, then more people will be likely to identify with HBCUs and, again, consider them a top choice for college. There's a lot of things going on with African Americans in this country today. And I think that now more than ever, when we look around and see so many issues in community, so many disparities in the way that we're engaging with police, there's a lot more focus on racial pride than we've had in the last few years, and I think HBCUs are going to be a benefactor of that. The question remains, can we work fast enough to make the adjustments in program offerings and make the adjustments in recruitment so that we can survive and begin to be stronger in a new economic reality?
Mm-hmm. And in the last 2 minutes, what would you tell HBCU alum to get busy? What should we do? What can we do to help out?
Become knowledgeable about your school, understand what programs are strong at that school, convince your classmates, convince your job, convince your church, convince your fraternity or sorority to make gifts to that school in support of those programs which are strong. Don't just say we're giving or we went to homecoming or we bought a ticket to something and say that that's support. The support is contributing to the endowment, which helps the school to operate and offer scholarships and to gross money off the interest that's derived from those gifts. The money is to get your company to say, hey, if I'm a long-time employee here and y'all like what I do, there's plenty more of me at this school.
Help me out.
Invest in the school and get more of me.
Okay.
Or you go to these schools and say, what can we do to volunteer in the way of recruiting students? What can we do in the way of going to some of these high school fairs and trying to get students interested?
Okay, and finally, how do we sign up real quickly, Jared, for HBCUdigest.com? Just go to your website?
Yep, visit HBCUdigest.com. It's updated all day, 7 days a week, and look forward to many more conversations like this with you guys.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. That's Jared Carter with HBCUdigest.com, and we'll be right back.
I'm Rashonda Tate Billingsley, author of Mama's Boy, and you're listening to Another View on 89.5 FM WHRV.
And if you're a fan of author Rashonda Tate Billingsley, we have a special treat. Be caller number 3 at 440-2665 right now, and we'll give you 3 of her books. Call 440-2665 right now, and we'll give you 3 of her books. Caller number 3. Rashonda Tate Billingsley has written over 35 books, 3 of which are about to become made-for-TV movies. Our Lisa Godley recently sat down with this award-winning writer and journalist about her accomplishments and plans for the future.
Rashonda Tate Billingsley's novels have captivated readers worldwide. Now she has a chance to inspire audiences through another medium with 3 made-for-TV movies. This summer, Let the Church Say Amen will be the first of her books to hit the small screen.
They say a family who prays together stays together. But what they don't say is a family will criticize.
I'm tired of you being a disappointment.
Tell lies.
You chose to turn your back on your own son. You made a mess of your life, not me. Every step, I stand by my family.
And as an author, that's a dream come true, to see your work come alive on the screen. I do get to get a cameo with a couple of lines in there.
That's cool.
Just the whole process.
Her passion for creative writing drove her to write her first book, My Brother's Keeper, 15 years ago.
In 2000, I decided to step out of the journalism realm. I still was doing that during the day, but at night, I'd go home and let my imagination take over. And I had been talking about writing the book long before I actually sat down and wrote the book. And it was when I finally decided I'm going to actually do this. And I set small goals, because that's the problem a lot of times with everyone that has a book inside them. You can always talk about getting it done, but life will get in the way.
Absolutely.
And so I had to tell myself, set a small goal so you can really make this dream a reality.
Billingsley is excited about her latest release.
Mama's Boy is kind of a rip from the headline story. It is actually about a woman whose son is videotaping a confrontation with police. She has a 16-year-old African-American son, and he and his friends are hanging out when they're accosted by a police officer. When all is said and done, he accidentally shoots the police officer. The officer is white, and they're in Jasper, Texas, which is rife with racial tension. But what I don't do, I don't vilify police. What I try to do is present both sides, how stereotypes can lead to confrontations like this. And so I look beyond that. It is a multi-layered story that looks at things from all perspectives.
She believes these stories are compelling because she writes the truth.
Even though it's fiction, I still write reality. And so the last thing I want to do is create a story that's not realistic, that's not plausible, that people can't relate to. The reason it is resonating with readers so much is because many of them are living it. Many of them can relate to it.
Writing novels isn't her only passion. She founded the publishing company Brown Girls Books, along with fellow author Victoria Christopher Murray.
We started this publishing company because there are so many authors who no longer have book deals because the industry has changed. And at our respective companies, we're with Simon & Schuster, she's with Touchstone, I'm with Gallery, we were among the last few African-American authors standing. And that was not because we're the most talented, it's just the industry has changed. And so what we wanted to do was give those established authors a chance to have their voice to be heard and to introduce the world to new authors.
And she shares her path to writer success.
good books are not written, they're rewritten. And I think that's what kills a lot of authors or aspiring authors. They sit in front of the computer, or even if they write longhand, and they try to craft the perfect words the first go round. And I'm a firm believer in just getting it all out. And then you go back in and you clean it all up. One time frame that works for me may not work for you, because your muse may be slow in sharing, what it wants you to tell. Your creative juices may not be as fast as the next person. So you can't compare them, but you just have to do it. You have to do it on a regular basis if you're serious about getting a book out.
Rashonda Tate Billingsley is a firm believer to not give up on a dream.
When I look back, when I started out, I got so many rejection letters. I keep them now in a big box, tons of rejection letters. I always think back, if I had let those rejection letters validate me or stop me, I'd still be somewhere waiting to realize my dream.
For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
And you can find out more about Rashonda Tate Billingsley at RashondaTateBillingsley.com. And don't forget that her bestseller, Let the Church Say Amen, hits the screen on August 30th on BET. Lisa's story on Rashonda Tate Billingsley was produced by Another View interns Artem Bracey and Jessica Jane. And congratulations to Mark Askew of Norfolk, who will receive 3 of her books. And that's our show for today. If you'd like to hear it again or share it with a friend, please visit our website, anotherviewradio.org, and download the podcast. You can also sign up for our eView newsletter, a once-a-week reminder of upcoming programs. And guess what? We're on Facebook, so please like us. Next week, Lisa and I are off to the National Association of Black Journalists Convention in Minneapolis, where Another View is a finalist for a Salute to Excellence Award for our show on natural hair. We thought it would be fun to let you listen to that show while we're away, so everybody cross your fingers and hope that we become a winner. We'll let you know the following week. Our theme music was composed and performed by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Todd Washburn is training under Victor Bowen, who is our audio engineer. And Chantel Davis answered our phones. It was a great show today, everybody. Thanks so much for participating. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Make it a fabulous weekend, and let's get together again next Friday at noon for Another View.